So this is going to be a continuation from the last video I made about brain waves, EEG machines, epilepsy or seizures, what's going on in that experience, and a couple more things added onto it. So remember in my last video how we was discussing how some patients during seizures experience out-of-body experiences. So I came across this article and I'm gonna read some of the stories which are in relation to kind of my last video, and we can unravel this together. So it says alterations of consciousness are critical factors in diagnosis of epileptic seizure. With these alterations in consciousness, some persons report sensations of separating from the physical body. Experiences that may in rare cases resemble spontaneous out-of-body experience. This study was designed to identify and characterize these out-of-body like subjective experiences associated with seizure activities. So they sampled about 100 patients, and they said 7 of them reported out-of-body experiences associated with seizures. So it says there have been growing interest in the subjective descriptions of these conscious alterations in patients with epilepsy as a source of data, in addition to objective observations of patients' behavior and communications and electroencephalographic, that's what the EEG machine is called, evidence of altered brain activity. So they classified near-death experiences as like out-of-body experiences. So it says of the 100 patients interviewed, 55 were able to recall some subjective experiences associated with their seizures. Of those 55 patients, 53%, 29 of them reported they could recall more than 10 seizures associated with subjective experiences. 42% reported between 2 and 10 seizures associated with the experiences. So I assume that they did different trials and they was just coming up with their findings. In each trial they interviewed about 100 people, and the answers was pretty different. I'm guessing on how they framed the question, because some people didn't relate out-of-body experiences with near-death experiences, because it says, however, in their subsequent responses on the NDA scale, that's the near-death experience scale, 7 patients reported a sensation of having left their body at some point during the seizure. When asked why they had not mentioned out-of-body experiences during their open-ended narratives, the patients commented either they had forgotten about the out-of-body experience sensations until the interview mentioned them, or they did not think that that was the interviewer had meant by experience associated with seizures. Okay, but now I'm going to get into some of the experiences that these people had. So this 28-year-old female who was a graduate student with symptomatic localization related epilepsy. So she reported 2 to 3 simple partial seizures a week, which she described as the world coming in, without attenuation of consciousness. She said that these events began at the age of 24 and lasted about 30 seconds. So beyond inaudible speech and unable to comprehend written language, sometimes printed words would appear as gibberish. The more complex seizures would last about 20 minutes. She reported leaving her body during every complex partial seizure. While her body became immobile, she felt like she was floating above it and could view her body and its surroundings from the above. However, she reported a dual consciousness in which, while seeming to hover above her body, she also remained aware of bodily sensations. She reported that if someone brushed against her body, the sensation would snap her back into her body and end the seizure. This kind of also reminds me of when you're having sleep paralysis. Like, I experienced sleep paralysis myself, and I noticed that if I'm able to move a part of my body, even if it's like a little pinky or wiggling my toes, I'm kind of able to get out of the sleep paralysis, right? She said the experience of being out of her body was unpleasant and alarming, and she feared something might happen to her body when she was not in control of it. So this is another patient, a 43-year-old unemployed man. He had cryptogenic localization-related epilepsy. He reported having 2 out-of-body experiences associated with seizures. The first occurred about 15 years ago. He felt that he definitely left his body and was flying, and that he encountered many people whom he had known in his childhood in another city. He had a profoundly beautiful experience in which a person he had known previously came to him in angel form to show him a woman he would later marry, but whom he had not yet met at that time. Around 4 to 5 years ago, he had a second out-of-body experience during the seizure. He again felt He left his body and was flying, but this time encountered no one. So he had a positive experience, experiencing the feelings of peace and love and oneness, feeling everything was interconnected, and he felt that his marriage, which was failing at the time, had a profound meaning of which he was previously unaware of. Now, 26-year-old male college student with symptomatic localization-related epilepsy had a maximum of 20 intractable complex partial seizures a month with secondary generalizations since the age of 15. He reported a reoccurring but vague sense of leaving his body during seizures, and I quote, he said, "I feel like I'm seeing myself from somewhere else on occasion," but could not elaborate on that description, nor could he say how many times it occurred. A 30-year-old woman also reported she had about 2 or 3 out-of-body experiences with the seizure, which lasted 10 to 20 seconds, and she stated that she felt herself lift up, look down at her. She looked down at her body, and she could see and hear others. She stated that she felt weightless during this experience and found that frightening. I'm going to read one more experience, and if you guys is interested, I'll link the article in the description. Now, this one is a 46-year-old female caretaker at a group home for disabled children. Now, she reported one episode of feelings as if she was looking into her head, as if she were an observer of her own thoughts. She felt that at that time, as she were floating in the universe, seeing blackness, but with planets and stars. She reported that experiences as very frightening because she had no control over the floating. Now, another thing that I found interesting about epilepsy, right, is that epilepsy is the most common neurological disorder seen in dogs, right? So I was thinking to myself, like, are dogs having these outer body experiences? Like, are they experiencing these mental time travel, right? And it made me think of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, because he is a time traveling dog. And I'm like, Sherman is a common name that you hear a lot in like movies and shows, right? So you remember the movie Eddie Murphy and Sherman Clump. And then we have Finding Nemo. The address that Dorothy kept forgetting was P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way, right? And then like P. Sherman makes you think of Mr. Peabody and Sherman. So is this also a relation of like some type of memory loss type of thing as well, like dementia type of thing? Because when you look up what the Sherman means, it means like a sheep shearer, right? And a sheep shearer is somebody who shaves off the fur from the sheep, right? So it's like, I guess, being cut off from something. So you can be cut off from like a memory or a time in your life. And that kind of would, I guess, explain how Dorothy, she was cut off from that memory. She couldn't remember this address. So being cut off from a memory in time, I'm guessing. And then in another professor, he was a scientist, and he was kind of like depressed about, being obese. And then he makes this potion, right? That basically one of the side effects is having a split personality. So he was cut off from his original self, and like this altered personality is taken over. Basically was trying to take over him, right? So is that like another relation to being like cut off from your former self or a former place in time? And I was thinking about the sheep shearer and the cutting off of the hair, because hair is very symbolic to identity. I also was thinking about like the movie The Avatar, where he was connecting like his hair to like the animal. So it says in the first Avatar movies, Navi's hair actually served a very specific purpose. So it says the hair was a part of the nervous system and their way of the Navi communicating their thoughts, memories, and emotion with the creature. So cutting off the hair is cutting you off from your... So back to like the Sherman and memories and being cut off from your memories, which is dealing with the hippocampus area of the brain, which we discussed in the other video. Your memories are basically a part of your identity, and if you're cut off from your memories, you're cut off from that, then it's like, who are you? So that's kind of the relation that I see with that. And also I was thinking, like, have dogs mastered time traveling this whole time? So they actually did studies with dogs in EEG machines, right? And it says in early intracranial EEG studies, dog spontaneous brain rhythm roughly at the beta range around 20 to 30 hertz, right? So dogs are basically vibrating at this beta frequency which deals with alertness, concentration, cognition. So it's dealing with perception, sensations, ideas, intuition. And this also made me think of like another time traveling dog, Wishbone, right? And I used to have a dog. I had a couple dogs, but I remember naming one of the dogs Hercules because of the Wishbone show, right? And Wishbone was about a dog who imagines himself in like different characters in different books, right? He just has a big imagination, and the only people who could like hear Wishbone talk was the characters in his daydream, and obviously the audience, the viewers, right? Which also reminds me of the constellation Canis Major, dealing with like the Sirius dog star. From my perception, a lot of these stories are basically like retold Greek mythology or whatever, right? And they just change up, the characters or whatever. But if it's dealing with like a dog and the man is probably most likely supposed to be symbolic of Orion, and the dog is supposed to be symbolic of like the Sirius dog star. And probably why they come up with the saying all dogs go to heaven, right? And heaven is basically known as like the higher realms, dealing with the celestial bodies like the moon, the sun, the stars. And as below, it would be dealing with like your mentality, your thoughts, ideas. But not to get thrown off track or whatever, I might dive more deep into this since this is kind of like an add-on. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you on another video.